Imagine believing you found love, real, deep, transformative love, only to discover years later that what you've been calling love was just mutual comfort that never encountered the conditions brutal enough to reveal it was a beautiful lie you both agreed to believe. You think love is something you find, recognize, and keep on. But here's the paradox that shatters that fantasy. Love isn't discovered, it's forged. And the forging requires 7 specific trials that most relationships never encounter because you've become so skilled at engineering your life to avoid difficulty that you've also engineered away the very conditions that would prove whether your love is real or just an extended honeymoon. You're calling forever. The cruel truth? The tests aren't optional. They're inevitable. And they're already happening whether you recognize them or not. Every relationship faces them. Time, trust, distance, sharing, conflict, sacrifice, and the annihilation of pretense. The question isn't whether these tests will arrive. The question is whether you'll recognize them as tests or mistake them for relationship failures when they're actually relationship revelations. Think about every relationship you've watched die. What killed it? Usually not infidelity or dramatic betrayal, but something far more mundane. They got bored after the novelty faded, or they couldn't handle being apart, or their first real fight revealed they didn't actually know how to disagree without destroying each other, or one person's success made the other feel threatened, or the relationship required a sacrifice neither was willing to make. These weren't failures of love. They were revelations that what existed wasn't love yet. It was attraction, compatibility, convenience, or infatuation masquerading as love because it hadn't been tested enough to reveal what it actually was. Here's what nobody prepared you for. The feeling of love is abundant and easy. Real love, the kind that survives reality, is rare as hell because most people bail the moment the first real test arrives, convinced that if love were real, it wouldn't be this hard. But love isn't hard because it's failing. Love is hard because it's becoming real. So, which tests are you currently failing while telling yourself your relationship is fine? Which trials are you avoiding while calling that avoidance protecting the relationship? And how much longer can you mistake the absence of challenge for the presence of genuine connection? The tests aren't random obstacles. They're evolutionary requirements embedded in the structure of human pair bonding. And understanding why they exist reveals something most people never grasp. Love isn't a feeling you maintain. It's a capacity you build through repeatedly choosing each other under conditions designed to make choosing each other difficult. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer argued that humans are driven by will, a blind, insatiable force that uses reason as its servant, not its master. You think you choose your partner rationally, but you don't. You choose them because something deep in your evolutionary biology recognized patterns that triggered bonding mechanisms you have no conscious access to. The tests exist because that initial bonding mechanism, the neurochemical flood that makes new love feel like destiny, is temporary by design. It's evolution's trick to get you to pair bond long enough to reproduce, lasting roughly 1836 months. The tests reveal what exists after the biological trick fades. Do you have actual compatibility, or were you just high on oxytocin and dopamine? The test of time isn't about whether you can tolerate each other indefinitely. It's about whether you can continue choosing curiosity after familiarity has eliminated novelty. The psychologist Esther Perel notes that the great paradox of intimacy is that the same familiarity that creates security kills desire. Time tests whether you've learned to generate novelty within familiarity, or whether you need constant external newness to feel alive. Most people fail this test not by leaving, but by staying and becoming roommates. They pass from lovers to co-managers of a domestic enterprise, wondering why the passion died without realizing they stopped taking the risks that passion requires. Time revealed they were more in love with the feeling of discovery than with the person they were discovering. The test of trust operates at levels most people never reach. The surface level, will they cheat, lie, betray, is actually the easy part. The depth level is terrifying. Can you be known completely and still be loved? Carl Jung understood that everyone wears a persona, a social mask we present to the world. But in intimate relationships, we must eventually remove that mask. The test of trust asks, when they see the shadow self you hide from everyone else, will they stay? Most relationships fail this test through strategic disclosure. You reveal carefully curated vulnerabilities, the ones that make you seem deep, but don't actually risk rejection. I'm too caring, or I work too hard, aren't vulnerabilities. They're humble brags. Real vulnerability is revealing the petty, mean, weak parts you're ashamed of and trusting they won't weaponize them in the next fight. The test of distance reveals whether your connection exists independent of proximity. The neuroscientist Jaak Panksepp discovered that separation activates the same pain circuits as physical injury. But here's the test. Does distance create panic or trust? If absence triggers anxiety, control, or suspicion, you've failed. You don't trust the bond to survive when you can't monitor it. You're not in love. You're in anxious attachment. Distance isn't just geographical. It's also the distance that occurs when one person grows, changes, or needs to retreat into themselves. Can you allow them to exist beyond your perception without that absence feeling like abandonment? Or do you need constant access to their inner world to feel secure? The test of sharing exposes whether you can build something bigger than both of you without either person disappearing. The philosopher Martin Buber distinguished between I-it relationships, where the other person is an object meeting your needs, and I-thou relationships, where you recognize the other as a full subject, separate and whole. The test asks, can you share your life without colonizing theirs? Most people fail through one of two extremes: absolute merger, where individuality dissolves, or absolute separation, where you're two individuals happening to occupy the same space. Both avoid the difficult work of interdependence, remaining whole while building something shared. The test of quarrel reveals character in ways comfort never could. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "It is not a lack of love, but a lack of friendship that makes unhappy marriages." Lovers can't stand conflict. Friends can disagree without the relationship becoming existential. The test asks, can you fight like friends, seeking truth and understanding, or do you fight like enemies, seeking victory and vindication? John Gottman's research identified the 4 horsemen that predict divorce: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Notice what's missing? Anger, disagreement, conflict itself. The presence of conflict doesn't kill relationships. The manner of conflict does. You fail this test when you can't disagree without character assassination, when you use intimacy as ammunition, or when winning the argument matters more than maintaining the relationship. The test of sacrifice asks whether your love is bigger than your ego's need to win, to be right, to have your way. Viktor Frankl, survivor of Auschwitz, argued that suffering becomes bearable when it has meaning. The test isn't whether you can sacrifice, it's whether you can sacrifice freely, without keeping score, without that sacrifice becoming debt. Most people fail by martyrdom disguised as generosity. They sacrifice, then spend decades reminding their partner what they gave up, turning love into leverage. Real sacrifice is choosing their well-being over your comfort and meaning it when you say, "I chose this freely." The moment you weaponize what you gave up, you've revealed you never freely gave it up at all. The test of vulnerability, the seventh test, is the most terrifying because it requires the annihilation of pretense. Not selective honesty or strategic disclosure, but the complete relinquishment of image management. Can you exist in the relationship without performing? Can you be your worst self? Petty, scared, selfish, wrong, and trust they won't leave? Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Hell is other people, because other people see us as objects, fixing us in their perception." But the test of vulnerability asks, can your partner see you as a subject, constantly becoming, allowed to contradict yourself, to be different than who you were yesterday? Or do they, and do you, need you to remain consistent with the story of who you're supposed to be? Your untested relationship is dying in ways you're calling natural, when they're actually symptomatic of foundations you never built, because you never encountered conditions that would require building them. The boredom you're experiencing after 3 years isn't because you chose wrong. It's because you failed the test of time. You never learned to generate novelty within familiarity. So now that novelty has faded, you're left with familiarity that you find suffocating. You're blaming them for being boring, when the real problem is that you never developed the skill of remaining curious about someone you think you already know. The anxiety you feel when they don't text back immediately isn't love. It's failed trust. You haven't built secure attachment, so their absence triggers panic. You monitor, check, and need constant reassurance, not because you love deeply, but because you trust shallowly. And that constant need for reassurance is slowly convincing them you're exhausting rather than loving. The resentment accumulating from small sacrifices is evidence that you never passed the test of sharing. You're keeping score, cataloging what you give versus what you receive, turning love into a transaction. Every act of generosity is actually an investment you expect returned with interest. And when the returns don't match your expectations, you call them selfish without recognizing you were never generous. You were just bad at negotiating. The fights that leave you both devastated for days reveal that you failed the test of quarrel. You haven't learned to disagree without destruction, to be angry without cruelty, to fight for understanding rather than victory. So every conflict becomes a referendum on the relationship rather than a natural process of two different people negotiating shared reality. And beneath all of this is the test most people never even attempt: vulnerability. You're performing a version of yourself you think they fell in love with, terrified that if they saw the real you, messier, needier, darker than the curated version, they'd leave. So you live in constant low-grade anxiety, monitoring yourself, editing your responses, ensuring you never fully relax into being. But here's the devastating irony. By protecting them from your full self, you've made it impossible for them to love your full self. They love a performance. And you, knowing they love a performance, can never fully believe you're loved. You're trapped in a relationship where you're constantly chosen, but never truly known. This is what untested love becomes: mutual performance art, comfortable cohabitation, a relationship that looks functional from the outside, but feels hollow from within. You're together, but alone. Connected, but unknown. In love with who you're pretending to be, while your actual selves atrophy from neglect. Here's the shift that changes everything. Stop protecting your relationship from difficulty. Start recognizing that difficulty is how love proves itself real. You've been operating under a toxic assumption that good relationships are easy, and if yours is hard, something must be wrong. But the inverse is true. Relationships that never encounter difficulty never develop depth. Comfort that's never challenged never reveals whether it's built on genuine compatibility or just mutual conflict avoidance. The rebellion begins with actively seeking the tests rather than avoiding them. Seeking the test of time. Stop trying to keep it fresh through external novelty, new restaurants, new trips, new experiences. Start practicing what Esther Perel calls erotic curiosity, approaching your familiar partner as someone who contains mysteries you haven't explored. Ask questions you assume you know the answers to. Challenge your assumptions about who they are. Most people become bored because they have stopped paying attention, then blame their partner for not being interesting enough to overcome their inattention. Seeking the test of trust. Take the terrifying step of revealing something about yourself you've been hiding. Not something that makes you look deep, something that makes you feel exposed. The petty jealousy, the shameful fear, the mean thought you had. Watch what they do with it. Do they weaponize it or hold it gently? This is how you discover whether you're safe with them. Seeking the test of distance. Practice separateness within togetherness. Take trips alone. Develop interests they don't share. Give them space to exist beyond your perception. If this triggers panic, you've discovered you don't trust the bond. And now you can work on building that trust rather than avoiding the discovery. Seeking the test of sharing. Start asking, am I giving because I want to or because I expect return? If you're keeping score, even unconsciously you're failing. Practice giving freely. Time, attention, sacrifice, without attachment to reciprocation. Notice the resentment that arises when they don't pay you back, and recognize that resentment as evidence you were transacting, not loving. Seeking the test of quarrel. Stop avoiding conflict. Start having the hard conversations. But change how you fight. Not to win, but to understand. John Gottman's research shows that successful couples don't fight less. They fight better. They stay curious even when angry. They can say, "Help me understand your perspective," even when that perspective feels wrong. Start practicing this. In your next disagreement, your only goal is understanding their position well enough to argue it yourself, seeking the test of sacrifice. Identify something you want that conflicts with what they need. Then choose them, freely, without mentioning what you're giving up. The moment you point out your sacrifice, you've turned it into a weapon. Real sacrifice is invisible, not because you hide it, but because it genuinely doesn't feel like loss. You've chosen a version of yourself that prioritizes their well-being, and that self is who you prefer to be. Seeking the test of vulnerability. Stop performing. Start existing. Let them see you at your worst without apologizing or explaining. Cry without making it palatable. Need without making it cute. Fail without immediately spinning it into a learning opportunity. Be the full, messy, contradictory human you actually are. and see if they can love that. If they can't, you've learned something crucial. If they can, you've finally found the only thing worth having: someone who loves you, not your performance. Here's what changes everything. The tests aren't measuring whether your relationship is good enough. They're transforming you into people capable of real love. You enter relationships as people shaped by childhood wounds, cultural conditioning, and evolutionary drives you don't consciously understand. You bring anxious attachment from inconsistent parents, avoidant patterns from being punished for needing, defensive habits from environments where vulnerability meant harm. The tests don't destroy good relationships. They destroy the immature parts of you that prevent good relationships. The test of time kills your addiction to novelty and builds your capacity for depth. The test of trust destroys your performed self and liberates your authentic self. The test of distance kills anxious attachment and builds a secure connection. The test of sharing destroys scorekeeping and builds genuine generosity. The test of quarrel kills your need to be right and builds your capacity for understanding. The test of sacrifice kills ego and builds love. The test of vulnerability kills pretense and builds truth. You're not meant to pass the tests as you are. You're meant to be transformed by them. This is why the relationships that survive all 11 tests become unrecognizable from where they started. The people who emerge on the other side aren't the same people who entered. They've been broken and rebuilt, again and again, each test revealing a part of themselves that needed to evolve. Real love isn't finding someone you don't have to change for. Real love is finding someone worth changing with. Someone whose presence calls forth the person you're capable of becoming, but would never become alone. The tests are the crucible, and you either embrace them as a transformation or flee from them as a failure. So stop asking whether your relationship is passing the tests. Start asking whether you're willing to be transformed by them. Because the relationship you save might not be the comfortable arrangement you're protecting. It might be something far more terrifying and far more real. A love that's been tested enough to prove it's actually love. The tests aren't destroying your relationship. They're revealing whether you had one to begin with. And if you did, if something real survives the trials, then what emerges on the other side isn't love, despite the difficulty. It's love proven by it.